The Galactic Council had never known silence. From the moment it was formed, the Grand Chamber was filled with voices. Dozens of species discussing, arguing, voting, and debating everything from trade routes to space-time mining regulations. Among them, humanity had quickly become one of the most talked-about members. Earth's representatives were known for their sharp logic, fast innovation, and an unusual ability to solve conflicts that had troubled older civilizations for decades. So when the human delegation didn't arrive for the Council's quarterly summit, everyone assumed it was a delay. A harmless mistake. Even the High Speaker of the Viraxi, who usually suspected foul play in everything, brushed it off as a glitch in Earth's hyperspace relay. But hours passed. Then a day. And just when whispers began to rise across the chamber, a single signal came through. It wasn't a hologram. It wasn't live. It was a flat, text-only message transmitted directly into the Council's core network. It read, "Effective immediately, humanity severs all diplomatic ties with the Galactic Council. This decision is final. Nothing more. No reason, no warning, no explanation." For the first time in centuries, the Council chamber was still. Not one ambassador moved. Not even the ever-dramatic Zerni delegates made a sound. And then, as though a switch had flipped, chaos broke out. Some claimed it was a prank. Others thought Earth was under threat or that someone had hijacked their systems. But deep down, most knew it was real. Humanity didn't do things halfway. They didn't send empty messages. The fact that they'd walked away without so much as a goodbye sent fear running through the Council, like cold metal slicing into warm air. Varnthol, a senior ambassador from the crystalline Talari species, was immediately summoned by the Inner Circle. Known for his calm reasoning and deep ties with Earth's diplomatic corps, he had attended more meetings with humans than any other. Talari. His assignment was simple on paper: find out why humanity left and convince them to return. But Varn already felt the weight behind that message. Something had shifted, deeply and quietly. The Council's data hub showed no signs of a cyber attack. Earth's planetary systems had gone into what was being called protocol silence. Their relay stations were active but unresponsive, and all known diplomatic channels were closed. Earth had pulled back not just from politics but from contact entirely. Varn requested access to the classified archive, a highly restricted record of off-the-record transmissions and incident reports logged by each Council race. It took hours of approvals and political posturing, but eventually, he stood in front of the archive terminal aboard the orbital station circling Yeldros Prime. Inside, he searched the last flagged reports from the human delegation. As lines of encrypted messages scrolled by, one caught his eye. It was sent 2 weeks before Earth's departure. It described irregular activity within Council trade agreements, strange pattern shifts in resource allocations, rerouted shipments, altered planetary survey results. The human delegates had logged it as a breach of operational ethics and warned that if the matter wasn't addressed, further trust deterioration would occur. But no investigation followed. The message had been filed and ignored. Varn leaned back, his translucent skin dimming in thought. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. Earth had seen something big, something hidden. And now, they were gone. Outside the archive window, the stars blinked coldly in the distance, each one a reminder of how vast and uncertain the galaxy truly was. The Council might have thought of itself as the center of the universe, but maybe, just maybe, it had forgotten what happens when the quietest species becomes the one to walk away first. Varn knew this was only the beginning. The humans had seen the cracks behind the Council's shining walls, and they had chosen silence, not as surrender, but as something more powerful. As Varn prepared to return to the Council chamber, his thoughts were not of politics, but of warning signs long ignored and a mystery that had only just begun to unfold. Varnthol stepped off the shuttle onto the silent deck of the Council's Deep Archive satellite, a lonely, metallic structure floating beyond the reach of most star lanes, hidden by layers of encryption and location shields. The satellite held records so secret that even council members needed permission to access certain floors. Inside, the artificial gravity hummed quietly beneath his boots as he moved through dim hallways lined with memory vaults and blinking terminals. The station felt more like a forgotten museum than the heart of interstellar knowledge. Varn had been granted temporary clearance, but even with his rank, he knew he would only be shown what the council allowed, or what they thought was safe. Still, the human message had left too many questions behind, and now Varn had to find the answers. He requested files marked by Earth's last transmissions and waited as the terminal slowly decrypted the contents. Rows of entries lit up, many flagged as unresolved or denied follow-up. Curious, he opened the first few. The human delegation had been tracking unusual shifts in interstellar trade, routes redirected at the last minute, cargo weights not matching reports, mining permissions granted to front companies with no real identity. At first glance, these might have looked like random administrative errors, but when viewed together, a pattern emerged. Someone had been quietly steering resources, gas, minerals, and even access rights to entire planetary belts, away from their rightful paths, often in ways that disadvantaged smaller or newer species. More disturbingly, the data pointed to larger systems being influenced as well, with some colonies experiencing strange disappearances of shipments or unauthorized satellite activity. The humans had flagged this behavior not once, but several times, each report becoming more urgent. Their last message wasn't just a complaint, it was a final notice. They had warned the council that unless these irregularities were investigated, Earth would be forced to act on its own. But the council had done nothing. The human concerns had been brushed aside, perhaps seen as paranoia, or more likely, a threat to someone's secret profits. Varn's fingers hovered over the controls as he opened one final file, a log that had never been officially filed. It was a private record, probably uploaded secretly. In it, a human envoy described being followed, their diplomatic shuttle, rerouted twice without explanation, and strange signals received during their last journey to a neutral moon. The envoy suspected surveillance by whom they didn't know. The words ended with a chilling phrase, "We are being watched, and not just by those who sit in the council." Varn leaned back, the glow of the screen reflecting off his crystalline skin. It was no longer just about political games. Something deeper was at work, something hidden under the surface of official meetings and signed agreements. He realized Earth had discovered it first and, instead of retaliating or exposing it publicly, had simply removed themselves from the playing field. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, Earth remained completely silent. Their communication networks were still active, but nothing was coming in or going out. No distress calls, no diplomatic responses, not even automated pings. From orbit, Earth looked peaceful, but all spaceports had gone cold. Trade ships that approached were met with automated warnings. Do not enter Sol space. No contact permitted. Some feared Earth was preparing for war, building weapons in silence, training armies underground. But surveillance scans showed no such activity. No military buildup, no fleet movements, no weapons testing. In fact, Earth's orbit seemed emptier than before. It was as if humanity had quietly turned off the galaxy and shut the door behind them. Varn returned to his quarters aboard the archive station and stared out at the stars beyond the thick glass wall. The galaxy was vast, full of noise and movement, but Earth had found something so dangerous, so disturbing, that their only response was complete isolation. What scared him most wasn't the silence, it was the fact that humans didn't act out of fear. They acted with purpose. Varn suspected they weren't hiding. They were preparing, perhaps not for war, but for something much more serious. And the rest of the galaxy didn't even know what was coming. The ambassador knew he had to bring his findings to the council, but he also knew that once he did, others would try to bury them again. Still, he had no choice. As he copied the encrypted files to a private core, he whispered a quiet phrase in his native tongue, a word that meant both warning and beginning. Because now, the true mystery had started. Earth hadn't vanished. They had simply stepped into the shadows. And shadows always meant something was being hidden. Varn just hoped it wasn't already too late to uncover it. At the edge of Sol space, where the known galaxy met the invisible boundary drawn by Earth's sudden silence, a fleet of Council diplomatic vessels hovered in tense formation. The mission was labeled as Peaceful Outreach, but each crew member knew they had been sent to test the limits of humanity's withdrawal. What they didn't expect was to be greeted not by warships, not by diplomats, but by a single, silent probe. The object floated calmly just outside the boundary, small and unarmed, yet surrounded by an unmistakable aura of finality. As the lead vessel approached, the probe activated and broadcast a short, emotionless message. Do not cross into human territory. Observation is permitted. Interaction is not. The words repeated once, then the probe powered down. No further. Instructions, no room for negotiation. The task force waited, hoping for a human reply, but nothing came. After 3 standard days in orbit, the fleet returned to Council space with only silence in their records. Inside the Council chamber, frustration began to spread like fire across dry leaves. Delegates demanded action. Some proposed sanctions. Others wanted to cut off all access to Earth's systems, while a few extreme voices even whispered about a show of force. But the reality was far more complicated. Over the last few decades, humanity had become more than just a council member. They were a cornerstone. Human-engineered navigation systems guided half of the galaxy's mid-range cargo ships. Their medical advancements had increased life expectancy on dozens of worlds. Earth-grown food products, resistant to radiation and easy to cultivate, had replaced imports for entire colonies. Cutting ties with Earth wasn't just political. It would break the balance of daily life. Slowly, panic replaced anger. The Council had never realized how deeply humanity had tied itself into the structure of interstellar society. And now, with Earth gone from the equation, holes were beginning to form. Holes no one else knew how to fill. While the Council argued, Varn Thol returned to his homeworld Talaris Prime, hoping to process the events he had witnessed. He was tired, but curiosity wouldn't let him rest. He began quietly comparing Earth's final reports with internal trade documents from his own government, and what he found left him shaken. Patterns began to appear, small approvals that matched the discrepancies humans had reported. Quiet. Trades, small redirections, changes that seemed harmless on paper but, when traced backward, led to profit schemes involving rare minerals and high-demand medicines. It wasn't just 1 or 2 people. It was an entire branch of his government, secretly benefiting from the manipulations Earth had tried to stop. For a long time, Varn simply stared at the data, torn between what he had sworn to protect and what he now understood to be the truth. If he reported it through the official Council channels, it would likely be buried, just like Earth's original warnings. If he stayed silent, he would become part of the problem. In the end, he chose something else. Late at night, using a private transmission frequency that couldn't be traced, he leaked the files anonymously to a neutral media relay station known for publishing sensitive information. Within days, the findings spread like wildfire. The HFY leak included encrypted human documents, Council trade records, and timelines that matched perfectly with Earth's last days in the chamber. There was no denying it. Earth hadn't left because they were angry. They had left because the system they were part of had stopped being honest, and they had no intention of being quiet accomplices. The Council's reaction was immediate and chaotic. Emergency sessions were called. Alliances fractured. Some governments tried to deny involvement, but the evidence was too clear, and public outrage grew rapidly, especially among smaller species who had long suspected they were being exploited. Protests broke out across Council planets, not against humans but in defense of them. Many called Earth brave for doing what others were too afraid to try. For the first time, people across the galaxy began to see the human silence not as abandonment, but as protest. Varn Thol watched it all unfold from a quiet corner of his city, far from politics, far from cameras. He had made his choice, but the cost of truth was beginning to rise. His own government placed him on indefinite leave, claiming health concerns. Yet privately, he received messages of support from strangers, even other ambassadors, who thanked him for shedding light on what had been hidden for too long. The mystery around Earth remained, but one thing was clear. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had taken a stand. Without ships, without weapons, they had created the loudest silence the galaxy had ever heard. And that silence was still echoing in every council hall, across every diplomatic channel, and through the minds of all who once thought of humans as just another species. Now they knew better. Earth had chosen principle over power, and the galaxy would never be the same again. While the Galactic Council struggled to recover from the scandal that had shaken its foundations, meetings were held behind closed doors, and entire departments were placed under review, but no solution seemed strong enough to repair the damage. Delegates argued over reforms while old alliances quietly dissolved. Corruption had spread deeper than anyone had guessed, and as the truth came to light, trust in the council faded faster than any of its leaders could control. It was in the middle of this storm that Earth finally broke its silence. A single transmission, short and calm, reached every major news relay, every council data feed, and every independent signal station. The message was simple. Truth matters more than treaties. The galaxy paused, caught off guard not just by the words, but by the confidence behind them. Within hours, Earth followed with something more surprising. They released open-source files, millions of them. Advanced navigation systems, clean energy blueprints, medical nanotech designs, agricultural techniques, and even security protocols once guarded under layers of bureaucracy. It was a flood of knowledge, and it came with no price, no restrictions, and no hidden codes. Systems once controlled by the most powerful council factions were now available to all, especially the civilizations that had always been treated as lesser. Smaller races who had long been ignored by trade alliances suddenly had access to tools that could transform their worlds. Colonies in distant sectors, once dependent on slow council approvals for basic infrastructure, began building new networks, using Earth's shared tech. As the data spread, it ignited a quiet revolution. Refugees from war-torn moons, exiled scientists, independent traders, and even mid-level diplomats began redirecting their journeys, not to council worlds, but toward human space. What they found was not the Earth of old, bound in meetings and formal rules, but something different. A growing coalition led by human thinkers, engineers, and visionaries who welcomed them not with military might, but with open systems and clear values. They called it the Horizon Accord, a parallel interstellar alliance built not on politics but on cooperation, innovation, and respect for individual autonomy. It wasn't a government. It wasn't a rebellion. It was something new, something many in the galaxy had never dared to imagine. And it was growing faster than anyone predicted. Meanwhile, inside council chambers, fear began to shift. It was no longer about Earth becoming hostile. It was about Earth becoming irrelevant to the old power structure. The council wasn't facing an invasion, but a replacement. For every world that joined the Horizon Accord, another left council influence behind. Economic charts grew unstable. Major trade guilds collapsed. Black market prices for human tech plummeted because it was now available for free. Diplomatic envoys sent to negotiate were met with polite indifference, as more species chose to deal directly with Horizon representatives instead of council ones. And through it all, Earth said very little. They didn't issue threats, didn't demand allegiance. They simply offered knowledge and a new way of working together. Varn Thol, now considered a neutral observer after his leak exposed the inner corruption, watched the shift with cautious hope. He traveled quietly between systems, meeting with former colleagues, new Accord members, and even the curious leaders of independent planets. Everyone asked the same question. How did humanity plan this? But Varn believed the answer was simpler than people thought. Earth hadn't planned to take control. They had simply stepped away from a broken system and built something better in its place. That quiet strength, that refusal to compete in old ways, had made them more powerful than any fleet ever could. And now, as the Accord continued to grow, Many in the council began to ask themselves if clinging to the past was worth losing the future. In corner offices and once proud halls, fear turned into doubt, and doubt turned into silence. For the first time in generations, the council wasn't worried about who held the strongest weapons or the richest contracts. They were worried about something far more dangerous, becoming irrelevant in a galaxy that had found a new direction. And at the center of it all stood Earth. Not loud, not aggressive, just quietly leading by example, proving that sometimes the greatest power is simply the courage to do what's right, even when everyone else has forgotten how. Many years had passed since Earth's final message echoed across the galaxy, and though the stars still shone the same way in every corner of the universe, much else had changed. The Galactic Council, once a powerful force that governed trade, diplomacy, and policy across thousands of systems, now existed more in name than in purpose. It still held meetings, and some older species still clung to its legacy, but its chambers no longer made the big decisions, and its voice no longer commanded the attention it once did. Where the council had once stood as the center of interstellar order, something new had taken its place, not through conquest or control, but through shared purpose and trust. The Horizon Accord, born from humanity's quiet departure and led, not by generals but by thinkers, builders, and teachers, had grown into the largest voluntary alliance ever known. Its members included not only planets, but entire star clusters, united by the simple idea that fairness and transparency were more valuable than titles or treaties. Trade flowed freely. Knowledge was open. Decisions were made through honest dialogue rather than power plays. People still remembered how it had begun, with silence. And now, that silence had become a symbol of something stronger than words. Varn Thol, once a council ambassador, now lived as an independent diplomat within the Accord. He spent his days moving between worlds, helping new members adjust to systems built not for control, but for cooperation. His once bright crystalline features had dimmed slightly with age, but his mind remained sharp. He often found himself reflecting on the path the galaxy had taken, especially during quiet evenings when the stars seemed particularly still. He remembered the fear the council felt when Earth had walked away. But more than that, he remembered the mistake they had all made, believing that humanity needed power to be dangerous. In truth, it had been their principles, their refusal to compromise what they believed was right, that had changed everything. Humanity had not broken the council. They had simply shown everyone what it looked like to walk away from something broken and build something better. On a visit to Earth, now considered a cultural capital and symbol of reform, Varn found himself in a place that had become a point of pilgrimage for many, the Galactic History Museum. It stood not in a towering skyscraper, but within a simple, clean structure that welcomed beings of every kind. Inside, displays showed the evolution of diplomacy, the rise and fall of the Council, and the birth of the Accord. There were stories from distant moons, voices from colonists, scientists, and even former Council diplomats who had joined the Accord over time. And at the heart of it, surrounded by a quiet chamber filled with soft lights and starlight projections, was a single plaque. It was not large. It was not made of gold. It was carved from stone, old earth granite, smooth and unpolished. On it were words that had become the spirit of a movement. We chose silence not as an end, but as a beginning. Truth was our first diplomacy. Varn stood before the plaque for a long time. Around him, children of many species listened to stories, told by a gentle holographic guide about the time when Earth had said no, not with anger but with purpose, about how that single act had inspired millions to rethink how the galaxy could work. Some called it the Quiet Revolution, others simply called it the Turning. Whatever the name, it had started with one bold choice: to walk away from something unworthy, not in rage but in hope. As he left the museum and looked up at Earth's sky filled with passing ships, lights from orbiting stations, and the soft glow of distant satellites, Varn felt something he hadn't in years: peace. The galaxy was still complex. Conflict still arose and challenges never truly disappeared. But now, There were better tools to face them. Not just technology, but understanding. Not just systems, but shared values. And at the center of it all, not a flag or a throne, but an idea that doing the right thing even alone could be the most powerful act of all. The stars above didn't speak, but they remembered. They remembered the day Earth had left not to hide, but to lead differently. They remembered a species that had refused to be silenced by fear or controlled by comfort. Humanity had not raised weapons. They had raised standards, and the stars, with all their ancient memory, would never forget.